We often talk about a team's defensive systems, and Melbourne's shutout of the Sydney Roosters in NRL Round 20 was a wonderful example of a defensive system working in full effect. The Chooks are currently playing with the best attack in the NRL, but struggled to generate many positive looks against a Melbourne defence that worked really hard from the inside and stayed nice and high on the edges to cut down East's time with the ball. All game, we saw Melbourne's markers work really hard from the play of the ball, which allowed their edges to slide out and number up whenever the Chooks played out the back, or it allowed them to load up in defence and win dominant tackles, one off the ruck in yardage. See, Eli Katoa doesn't land this shot on Brandon Smith without the efforts of Alec McDonald and Trent Loiero, who bounce out from marker and prevent Brandon Smith from straightening up. It forces him sideways and straight into a big shot there from Katoa. Similar look here with Toops forced sideways from a one-off carry in yardage here. Allows Melbourne to get numbers in the tackle and win the tackle and ultimately force an error here. Melbourne working really hard off the line here allowed them to win dominant early tackles in the set, which slowed the Roosters' momentum down and created a snowball effect throughout a set. With every tackle, Melbourne were able to win. They were able to set their line a little bit earlier and get up even more quickly off their line on the following play, which had a flow-on effect throughout the sets. While the markers worked really hard to provide inside pressure, the edges also worked really hard to get off their line quickly and shut down the time that the Roosters had on the ball. We know how destructive Angus Crichton has been over the last couple of months, and this was a really common look for him in this game. Taking possession with Nick Meaney or Jerome Hughes right up in his face, it really prevented Angus from loading up on a carry and forced him to look for the offload or to cut back in field a few times. We saw Melbourne work really, really hard from the inside again to present a connected line through the middle of the field whenever the Chooks were herded back in towards the ruck. It just looked like what was a planned move from Melbourne to really cut down Angus's time with the ball and force him to send the ball back in field. You can see one of the few positive looks that the Roosters were able to generate in yardage in this one comes off the back of Hughes flying up off his line to send Crichton back in field, and it takes a couple of enterprising passes from the Roosters from coast to coast to really create a bit of space on that right edge. They send it back there the second time. But the speed of guys like Hughes and Ryan Pappenhausen in behind the line, Melbourne's ability to recover in the scramble, they do it better than most teams. And as we'll see in these next few examples, their ability to switch it up, go from defending really aggressively to being quite passive and buying themselves time to recover. It's what makes Melbourne one of the better defensive teams in the NRL right now. So whenever Easts did manage to generate an overlap on the edges, Melbourne would quickly adjust. Still working really hard from the inside, but guys like Hughes and Meaney, rather than flying up off their line and getting at Crichton, they actually start backpedaling, herding Easts towards the sideline, using the touchline as an extra defender, and also buying themselves time to slide out, number up, and allow their inside defenders time to work back into position in the line. You see here's a wonderful example. Sam Walker manages to get Tui Kamikamica filling up at A down the short side. That's a trigger for a half to run 10 times out of 10. He does so. Big Tui, not quick enough to actually retreat back on side, but he knows what he needs to do. Doesn't jam up and in, starts backpedaling. Jack Howarth has to turn in to help Tui, which actually sees him get beaten on the outside, but because Grant Anderson is also retreating, good communication between Howarth and Anderson here. Howarth's able to recover. Anderson slides out on Dom Young, and then the speed of Ryan Pappenhausen is good enough to recover the kick, and Melbourne are able to defend what's a really dangerous look for the Roosters' attack. Whenever Melbourne do find themselves defending on their line, they switch it up again and revert back to that really aggressive style of defence. Not only does it cut down Roosters ball players, time to make a decision with the ball, but it also buys Melbourne space and time in behind the line to recover, whether for a little kick option like we see here. Toops not left with many other options other than to dab one in behind the line. We can see multiple Melbourne defenders have filled up in cover in behind the defensive line once the Roosters are forced to play out the back. It does leave them vulnerable to the Harbour Bridge pass over the top. We saw the Roosters generate 2 positive looks with what is the most difficult pass available to the ball player in both of these scenarios. Melbourne are forcing the attack essentially to find the most difficult route to the try line, and the Roosters are good enough on these 2 occasions to ice the pass. The Dom Young no try, though, is a wonderful example of how this defensive system intends to work. You can see Melbourne Storm's edge here all sliding and releasing out to the next number as the Roosters play out the back. By the time Dom Young receives the ball, Grant Anderson stayed nice and high. Although they've all retreated out towards the edge, he hasn't dropped back in Jack Howarth's pocket. It means that Grant's in a really good position to rush Dom Young when he takes possession, catches him basically as Dom Young catches the ball. And the time that Grant's brought himself in behind the line, the time in that space, he uses all of it to start herding Dom Young towards the touchline and manages to push him into touch with a bit of a roll. A very special effort from Grant Anderson, but the system is what allows him to make this defensive play here. He's got room in behind the line to start pushing Dom Young towards the touchline, and he's up nice and high, which prevents Young from working up any speed and powering his way into the in-goal. If I'm guessing, that's exactly how Bellamy and the Storm would have drawn up this defensive system during the week, really trying to cut down the Roosters' time with the ball and preventing them from loading up in the carries. Head over to rugbyleaguewriters.com, dropping regular NRL and NRLW content starting this week, including some percentage play try scorer bets, which we had a bit of fun with last year. Cheers.